Well, hello, my friend. My name is Joe Bakhmutsky. I am the founder of Power to Be Happy and also the proud author of this book, Finding Hope in Times of Uncertainty, a guide to thriving in the challenging world of today. I think it's just about acknowledging that the world is not easy. You know, life can be tough sometimes. And one of challenges of life that we continually face is, if you will, the perennial challenge of life is conflict, right? And conflict, which is especially difficult with loved ones, right? Whether that's with your partner, whether that's with your friends, whether that's with your workmates, whether that's with your family, right? It's a part of life. And it can be something that is incredibly disheartening. It can be something that causes a great amount of frustration, pain, grief, all sorts of negative emotions. But it can also be something that helps us to learn about each other. It's something that can help us to heal and also to grow in a way that really makes sense for you and your life. And I know that, from really, let's take my relationship with my wife. We love each other dearly, but of course we do have moments where, things just clash, and we're kind of at each other and we're mad at each other and we fight with each other. It's just, it's how it happens. And when those moments happen, they're incredibly difficult. They're incredibly difficult because you feel, this whole, crazy mix of emotions when you're angry and frustrated and you don't know what to do, and it kind of overtakes everything, right? Because if this person is close to you, right, it's a big deal in your life, right? And what I found is that in relationships, in marriages, in close friendships, the key thing is that it doesn't really matter who is right and who is wrong. I think it's such an easy trap to fall into, to think, well, this person is like, they started it, or they're wrong, so they should apologize, or whatever, right? And that gets so difficult, right? That's when things can get out of control, because that's when conflicts start to build up, and it kind of has the snowball effect where it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you kind of just you despise each other and you don't even know what happened, right? You know what it's like. Maybe you've been in a relationship like that, or you've had a friendship like that, or something happened and then you don't even know what specifically went wrong. You just know that it's a mess and you can't stand that person, right? That's part of life. So we don't want it to go into a state where it's kind of frozen conflict, where it's just there and there's no way around it. We also don't want it to go where it's out of control and it goes to just ruin the relationship, right? We want it to contain it, and we want to be able to resolve it as soon as humanly possible. And that's why this realization that was such a huge breakthrough for me that I'm sharing with you, that it doesn't matter who is right or who is wrong, but whether you want to resolve this situation, right? Because I think this getting caught up in your own emotions and frustrations and feelings, I mean, there's all sorts of misunderstandings that happen with people. There's all sorts of mistakes that people make, and I'm not in any way disputing that. But when we think about most conflicts in interpersonal relationships, it seems to me that there's always, at least to a certain extent, there's two people who are responsible for it, right? If it's a friendship or it's a relationship or whatever the case might be, there's two people responsible for it. So both people have to take responsibility for things that they may have done wrong, right? Because if that is the case, then we can't just blame this other person, right? And that's tough for me to say, because for most of my life, I felt like I'm right. And yet, I feel that it's not even a point of discussion at that stage when the conflict happens. Because what matters is the desire to resolve it, not to point blame, not to feel righteous. I'm a professional at that, but to figure out who is right is not important. Putting that aside, but to figure out whether you want to resolve it. And why is that a big deal to you? That just was such a game changer, because when I remember this conflict with my wife, and I don't remember what it was about, but I was so mad, I was so frustrated, I had to get out of the house and go for a walk just to kind of try to clear my head. And I remember thinking, you know what, it doesn't matter who's right, it doesn't matter that I'm feeling like, you know, it's her fault and she said this and that, but what matters is, you know, if this is the person that I love, I want to make the first step. I want to make the first step because I care about it. I want to resolve it. I want to be able to get to the bottom of it, you know, and figure out what happened so that we can move on together. And that shift is massive. And I would urge you to try this. Next time this conflict that happens in your life, whether that's with your best friend, whether that's with your partner, whether that's with your someone in your community, whatever that is, if you have a conflict with someone who's close to you, right? I mean, if it's someone who maybe you don't really care much about, that's a different story. But if someone is close to you, I really want you to ask yourself, do I really want to resolve this? And why? Right? Because that way you will go, well, it will articulate, like, what does this person mean to you? What does this relationship mean to you? Is it worth fighting for? Is it worth standing up for? Is it worth putting aside your ego or your frustrations or pain to go, let's try and deal with it. Let's try and deal with it as best as we can, right? Not ignore it, not forget about it, not sweep it under the rug, but deal with it in a way that supports you and your way of life and your values. That's what it's all about. And when you take that first step, that shows real strength of character. That just shows who you are as a person on a deep personal level. And now you can deal with it. Now you can deal with the conflict as two people. Not as just one person who's battling their own frustrations and internal feelings, but as two people who are going to come together and try to work through things in a way that helps you both resolve it, right? Because it's very hard to resolve something on your own in conflict, right? It takes two people to resolve it together. And when together, that's when you can get past things. That's when you can understand each other. That's when you can learn to forgive, and that's when you can heal. And I really believe it's a process that is flowing, right? And that's why I really believe there's 4 key parts to it that really can add up to the word flow. And one is the feeling. So you want to really be able to examine your own feelings and go, well, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel worked up? Why do I feel angry? Why do I feel upset? What set me off? And why did it upset me? Was it something that played into it? Was it some kind of a misunderstanding or mistake, right? Too often we let our feelings just run our lives without trying to understand your own perspective and how did things happen. So I think examining this feeling for yourself and for the situation that you find yourself in with the person that you care about, that's critical. So that's the first part of flow, which is examine the feeling. Feelings are hugely important to understand what you feel, why, how did it come about. That's crucial. You can name them, you can articulate them. That means you have a way of controlling them. That's big, my friend. The L in flow is logic. Because now I want to be able to use logic to understand the situation. right? With you talked about, we talked about examining and naming the feelings that you have and why did it come up. But I want to understand the situation. How did this whole interaction happen? Was it something that led to it? Was there any circumstances? Maybe both of you have been in a stressful situation. Maybe there's other factors at play. How did it come up? What is the context? How has there anything that's been leading up to it? Right? That's very important, because we want to be able to use logic now instead of emotion to try and drive this process of resolving the conflict, right? Because you kind of thinking through it, you find in your own way of getting past it, to understand it on a logical level, to see how do things line up, to see what makes sense, what was cause and effect, that sort of thing, right? That's very important. And also all of this, by the way, this whole flow process, it happens on kind of parallel lines. You can do it within yourself first, but you also go through this process together, right? When you talk about it, so on your own and together, because it can be really helpful to do this in both ways, both kinds of conditions. The O is you want to be able to look at options. Right? Options means, like, especially this is particularly useful when there's two of you working through this. You go like, so what can we do now? Is there anything that we can do to understand like what caused it? Is it a matter of maybe changing what we do? Is it a matter of changing circumstances so that maybe it doesn't happen in this way in the future? Or maybe if it does happen, that we have a way of understanding or working through it, right? So we have to be able to look at options like, what can we specifically do now? Is there any way that we can address concerns or frustrations or maybe different points of view? Is there any way that we can address that, right? We have to look at options. We have to realistically come up with options before we can agree on something together. And then the fourth, the W in flow, is work, is making it work. That means that both people are agreeing to work through it. And you yourself are agreeing to work through it. You're going to do something about it. You looked at the options before, and now you're going to do something. Right? That's really crucial, because we don't want with conflict for these things to just float around, out there. Right? We want to make sure that we address them in a way that feels like you've done something real, something tangible, something that you both know about. Like I said, it can be this process, this flow can be done in parallel. It can be done through yourself, where you yourself, you examine your feeling, you look through things logically, you look at the options, you think about how do I make it work, but also working through this together, where you examine, you talk about why is it that I feel this way? You talk about logically, try to talk through it out loud and try to understand what's happened and what's going on. Understand the situation. Then you look at the options together and you say, what are the things that we can do about this? And then you put it to work and you make it happen. That is the crucial thing about it, my friend, to look at conflict not from a perspective of who's right or who's wrong, but whether you want to resolve it and why. Because that really connects you to what this person really means to you. Right? And that means that conflict is something that you can work through and learn about each other, right? About boundaries, because that's how we learn. If we don't come in with some sort of checklists or whatever, right? We have to be able to understand each other through kind of rubbing against each other and having this conflict and tension to find a way to resolve and grow together, whether this is a relationship or whether this is romantic, or whether this is a friendship, or whether this is something you have a work relationship, whatever the case might be, or business. You want to be able to work through it together in a way that sustains and makes sense for you. My friend, my name is Joe Bakhmutsky. I hope that was helpful. Please let me No, I'd love to hear from you, because I think it's such a crucial part of our lives. Because when we're able to deal with conflicts in a way that really makes sense for you, you're able to really put aside so much negativity, so much frustration, so that you can concentrate on doing things that really make sense for you and your way of life, to really lead a happier and more fulfilled and purposeful life. And if that's something that you want to be able to do, and you want to get clarity, breakthrough clarity on how to make that happen, then check out my coaching program, where I work with you one-on-one to really get you clarity in key areas of your life, to help you achieve more confidence, to help you achieve a greater vision of yourself, to make a greater impact and live with purpose, so that you feel that you truly belong. And to find out more about Clarity First, my coaching program, please go to the powertobehappy.com and click on the Clarity First link on the top in the menu. That's powertobehappy.com. My name is Joe Bakhmutsky. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you soon.